What's happening, everybody? So, with the Challenger and the Camaro going away, would that mean that there could be a bit of a vacuum created for some of the Japanese hot rods to come in and fill their slot? In essence, creating a resurgence of that Japanese golden era that we were all enjoying from the 80s and into the 90s. Cars like the Starion and its cousin car, the Conquest, the 3000 GT and the Stealth, and the like. You had the Talon. You had all types of really cool DSM cars, that's the Diamond Star Motors cars, that were that pairing of Dodge and of Mitsubishi back then. These were cars that were actually legitimate hot rods, with that Starion going up against the likes of a 944 Turbo. And of course, everybody remembers the 3000 GT and the Stealth that were going up against the likes of the 300Z and the Supra of its day. We're talking some heavy artillery here coming from overseas with the 300Z and of course, we all know about the Supra, but also with the Stealth and the Starion as well. We're all basically in line to take out any of its American counterparts. And I really do see this as an opening for the Japanese cars. I mean, think about it. The Supra so far has been doing incredibly well. And you guys know I've always had a little bit of a crush on that car. But with the new Nissan Z car coming, it was kind of called a 400Z, just with that 400 horsepower number, and a car of that size and of that styling, it just kind of screams a throwback era rematch. And guys, I gotta tell you, this is something that for me is really exciting. I've always been a big fan of the Japanese hot rods from back in the day, but in this case, it really does open up a question of, could Dodge get back into the same idea, that same overall value? It doesn't necessarily have to be V8 muscle to be absolutely just a riot to drive. Cars like the Conquest still have huge followings today, and the guys that are into them would have no other car. You've got the guys that are purists that stick with that big 4-cylinder turbo, or that will also go out and LS swap those things. And to be honest with you, the car with an LS swap is sick. I mean, just saying. But getting back to the point, could you imagine Dodge bringing back a platform that is more or less kind of in the same value as one of those old Conquests, but with that Hurricane inline 6? We're talking a car that would go up against the Supra and the Z, not necessarily the Mustang. And you might say, well, hey, listen, there's no replacement for displacement. Well, there are a couple of replacements for displacement. Number one, boost is always the equalizing factor. But two, in this respect, it might just be time. Because even though the Challenger and the Camaro are going away first, there is talk that the Mustang, at least with a V8, may not survive past 2030. So that's leaving us with the Japanese offerings. And how awesome would it be to have a resurgence of that old rivalry from the 80s? Also, if you could possibly stretch your imagination enough to where you could maybe absorb the Mustang with the EcoBoost engine in it, maybe there's a hybridization that could be incorporated into that drivetrain to bring the Mustang into this fight as well. Maybe there's a hot-rodded version of that EcoBoost that brings it in line in terms of horsepower and performance with the rest of the field. So now it could be Mustang, maybe a Conquest. I put air quotes out there just because I'm begging Dodge to make one. I'm first in line, by the way. And then the Supra and the Z. You could have a 4-way race, and it would be an amazing resurgence of nostalgia. See, that's the only thing that I think that a lot of guys would not necessarily be able to get past, is the fact that it's not a V8, but there's a lot of guys that would love it because they're not V8s, and because it is a harkening back to a really kind of interesting period of time in automotive culture, where you had 4-cylinder turbo front-wheel drive cars that were going up against, and in many cases beating, V8 rear-wheel drive cars. Then you had the 4-cylinder turbo rear-wheel drive cars and the 6-cylinder turbo cars that were absolutely wrecking shop on American iron. And it took the states a little bit of time to get their act together to catch up with the level of technology that was in those Japanese offerings. I gotta tell you guys, I would be a complete dive-in cannonball style buyer if Dodge were to put something out like that. But it would be even cooler to see all 3 or maybe 4 of these cars going at each other head to head, bringing back the feelings of back in the day when we had these screaming 6s and howling 4-cylinders going at each other. And by the way, beating those V8 counterparts that they were rolling up on. Man, that was some pretty interesting times. Maybe Dodge can scratch up a little nostalgia on that end too. Anyway, post up your comments. Let me know what you think. I'd like to get your opinion on that. Would you be all right with the exiting of the Challenger, bringing forth the entrance of something along those lines? That Conquest, that Starion type of car that could go up against the Mustang in any iteration, because that Hurricane 6 could be had with either 400 or 500 horsepower. So really, you could have your cake and eat it too if you're Dodge and you're planning accordingly. What about the Supra? What about the Z car? How interesting would that be to have that kind of rivalry really kick off? Would you be all right with that kind of a replacement? I'd love to hear your comments. Let me know what you think, and that's a wrap. Adios.